Architected comprehensive biographical script with sourcing considerations. Architected comprehensive biographical script with sourcing considerations. Here's a factual script built from verified reporting on Graham's career, relationships, and recent death. No unverified rumors included. He spent almost 3 decades as one of the most recognizable faces in the United States Senate, a small-town lawyer from South Carolina who somehow ended up in the middle of nearly every major political fight of his generation. Impeachment trials, Supreme Court battles, 2 wars, and a presidency he once called dangerous before becoming one of its fiercest defenders. Then, on a Saturday night in July 2026, it all ended within hours, and the tributes that followed came from people who agreed with him on almost nothing else. Lindsey Olin Graham was born on July 9, 1955, in the small town of Central, South Carolina, in Pickens County. His parents died when he was in college, leaving him to raise his younger sister Darlene, 9 years his junior, and he became her legal guardian. That early responsibility shaped a young man who would go on to build his entire public identity around duty, first to family, then to the military, and eventually to the Senate itself. He earned his undergraduate degree in psychology from the University of South Carolina in 1977, then a law degree from the same university in 1981. After law school, he was commissioned as an officer in the United States Air Force, where he served in the Judge Advocate General's Corps as a defense attorney before becoming the Air Force's chief prosecutor in Europe. He left active duty in 1989, transitioned into the Air National Guard and later the Air Force Reserve, and continued serving in uniform for more than 3 decades, including short deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan during congressional breaks, before retiring in 2015 at the rank of colonel. GovTrack, U.S. Graham's political career began modestly, with a single term in the South Carolina House of Representatives from 1992 to 1994. But that same year, he made history, winning South Carolina's 3rd congressional district and becoming the first Republican to represent it since Reconstruction. He rose quickly in Washington, and just 4 years into his House career, he was chosen as one of the House managers in the 1998 impeachment proceedings against President Bill Clinton, a role that put a relatively junior congressman on national television arguing a case that would define his early reputation as a hard-nosed conservative litigator. When longtime Senator Strom Thurmond announced his retirement, Graham ran for the seat and won it in 2002, beginning a Senate career that would stretch across 5 presidencies and continue unbroken until his death, with re-elections in 2008, 2014, and 2020. Inside the Senate, Graham built his reputation primarily around foreign policy, national defense, and the federal judiciary. He served on the Senate Judiciary Committee for years, eventually rising to chair it during the 116th Congress, and later served as its ranking member. He also chaired the Senate Budget Committee. Through those posts, he became one of the chamber's most consistent advocates for a muscular American role overseas, a hawk on Iran, a defender of NATO, and, in the final years of his life, one of the most vocal congressional supporters of continued American aid to Ukraine. That commitment wasn't just rhetorical. Graham made numerous trips into the war zone to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and it was on one of those trips, his 10th wartime visit to the country, that he spent his final full day of public life, meeting with Zelensky in Kyiv just before flying home. What made Graham unusual, even among veteran senators, was his ability to hold fierce ideological positions while maintaining genuine personal friendships across the aisle, relationships that outlasted policy disagreements, campaign attacks, and, in some cases, entire decades. The most storied of these was his bond with fellow Republican John McCain of Arizona. According to accounts of how the friendship began, McCain first took notice of Graham during the Clinton impeachment proceedings, when Graham, then a House manager, made an offhand remark about a man calling a woman at 2 in the morning being up to no good. McCain later said that was the moment he knew Graham was someone he wanted to spend time with. The 2 men campaigned together during McCain's 2000 and 2008 presidential runs, collaborated for years on foreign policy legislation as part of a Senate trio nicknamed the Three Amigos, and remained close even when they disagreed, including in 2017, when McCain cast the deciding vote against a health care overhaul Graham had helped write, prompting criticism from President Trump. When McCain died in August 2018, Graham wrote that America and freedom had lost one of their greatest champions, and that he personally had lost one of his dearest friends and mentors. Fox News. A similarly complicated but genuine friendship existed between Graham and Joe Biden. The two served together for years on the Senate Judiciary and Senate Foreign Relations committees, traveling internationally as colleagues even as they clashed repeatedly on policy, taxes, immigration, healthcare, judicial nominations, and Iraq war strategy among them. Biden later described the relationship as one built on disagreement that never fully erased mutual respect, noting that the two disagreed often and sometimes loudly, while still sharing a belief in the importance of public service and a love for the Senate as an institution, even with all its flaws and complexities. That friendship was tested most visibly during Graham's years chairing the Judiciary Committee, when he pushed for documents related to Hunter Biden and Ukraine, a move that strained the relationship publicly. Graham himself acknowledged the tension directly, saying at the time that if his friendship with Biden couldn't survive him doing his job as a senator, then it wasn't the friendship he'd believed it to be. Even so, when the assault allegation surfaced against Biden during his 2020 campaign, Graham publicly defended him, saying he'd never seen anything in Biden's character that would suggest the claim was true. Hunter Biden, reflecting after Graham's death, said he chose to remember the Lindsey Graham before Trump, the version of a senator who maintained close friendships with Democrats like his father and McCain during an earlier, less polarized period in Washington. The Hill. No relationship in Graham's career generated more public fascination, though, than his shifting alliance with Donald Trump. During the 2016 Republican presidential primary, in which Graham himself briefly ran before dropping out that December, he was among the most outspoken Republican critics of Trump in the entire field. Graham called Trump a kook, crazy, and unfit for office during that campaign, warning that Trump's temperament made him dangerous for both the party and the country. Those comments were widely covered at the time and would later be replayed constantly online as the relationship between the two men transformed. Once Trump won the presidency, Graham gradually shifted from adversary to ally, building a working relationship through direct engagement with the new administration, particularly around judicial nominations, defense spending, and foreign policy. By 2025, Graham was describing Trump as one of his closest friends, saying he was proud to have been present at the beginning of what he called the greatest political comeback in American history, and that on a personal level, he genuinely enjoyed the friendship. That transformation became one of the most closely watched political evolutions in modern Washington, cited by supporters as proof that Graham understood how to build influence with a sitting president of his own party, and by critics as evidence of political calculation overriding earlier convictions. Graham remained a defender of Trump through his second term, and it was Graham himself who helped shepherd through what the administration called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, a major legislative priority. Yahoo! Graham's death came suddenly, and it stunned Washington precisely because there had been no public indication anything was wrong. According to his office, he died on the evening of Saturday, July 11, 2026, following what was described as a brief and sudden illness. He had returned from Kyiv the day before, following meetings with President Zelensky, and was scheduled to appear on Meet the Press that Sunday morning. Preliminary findings released by the medical examiner of the District of Columbia identified the cause as an aortic dissection due to arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease. In plain terms, a tear in the body's main artery caused by a gradual hardening of the arteries over time. Medical officials noted the findings were preliminary and that a final death certificate would follow once toxicological and microscopic testing was complete. He was 71 years old. President Trump said he had spoken with Graham by phone that same Saturday evening, calling it, in retrospect, possibly his last conversation with the senator, and he described Graham on social media as one of the greatest people and senators I have ever known and a true American patriot. Tributes arrived quickly from well beyond his own party. Joe and Jill Biden released a statement,
saying they were shocked by the news, recalling their shared service on the Foreign Relations Committee and their disagreements, as well as their common devotion to public service. Senator Amy Klobuchar remembered him as loyal to friends and causes, willing to take political risks on difficult issues. International tributes were notable too. Ukrainian President Zelensky praised Graham's repeated wartime visits to Ukraine and his advocacy for the country's defense, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called him a beloved friend of both himself and of Israel, and Israeli President Isaac Herzog described him as a great American patriot whose sudden passing was shocking. What stands out across nearly all of those tributes, regardless of the politics of the person offering them, is how many of them focus not on Graham's votes or his television appearances, but on his relationships. The willingness of a deeply partisan senator to sit beside people he disagreed with, sometimes loudly, and still call them friends. That capacity for cross-party friendship was, in many ways, a holdover from an earlier era of the Senate, one increasingly rare in contemporary politics, where personal relationships and political battles have become harder to separate. Graham's career embodied that older model even as he also embodied the newer one, the rapid public realignment, the viral clip replayed out of context years later, the sense that a single relationship, whether with McCain, Biden, or Trump, could define how an entire career gets remembered. Over more than 3 decades in Washington, first in the House, then in the Senate, Graham compiled a legislative record that will likely be debated for years. His role in judicial confirmations that reshaped the federal bench, his consistent hawkishness on national security in Ukraine, his early and vocal opposition to the president he later became closely aligned with, and his long, complicated friendships that crossed party lines in a way that fewer of his colleagues ever managed. He voted in more than 8,000 roll calls over his career, missing only a small fraction of them, a record of near constant presence in a chamber he said he genuinely loved as an institution. Whether his legacy is remembered primarily for his hawkish foreign policy record, his role in reshaping the judiciary, or the remarkable arc of his relationship with Trump, one thing is clear from the outpouring that followed his death. Few senators in recent memory managed to be simultaneously so partisan and so personally connected to people on the other side of the aisle. That contradiction, more than any single vote or headline, may end up being what people remember most about Lindsey Graham's nearly 30 years in national politics.